Welcome back, everyone, to the special series I'm thrilled to be hosting on LinkedIn called The Entrepreneur Chair. Throughout this series, my goal is to provide you with authentic and intimate conversations with trailblazing entrepreneurs that are reshaping the Austin business scene. From startup founders to seasoned business moguls, we'll dive deep into their triumphs, their challenges, and the pivotal moments that have shaped their entrepreneurial journey. Today, we are so honored to have with us today Sue Snyder. She's a powerhouse in every sense of the word. She's an engineer, attorney, and seasoned C-suite executive who now serves as a board member and advisor and consultant to companies and law firms alike. Sue's career spans industries and continents. She's advised Fortune 500 companies, served as a partner at a top 100 law firm, and led water desalination projects across the U.S. and internationally. As an advisor and board member for EWM, a technology company innovating in the clean water space. She's also been an adjunct professor in business environmental law, chaired numerous trade and industry committees, and worked extensively on public-private partnerships, including leading the creation of the largest state incentive project on record. Sue has authored more than 40 articles, spoken at conferences around the world, and earned recognition in the Best Lawyers in America, Legal 500, and Chambers USA. Welcome, Sue.
Oh, thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you so much for that great introduction. You're way too kind, that's for sure. It's a pleasure to be here. Very excited to have a conversation with you.
Your background is just amazing, so deep and rich, and I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Well, thank you.
Well, let's jump right in. You know, you've had all kinds of roles, executive, advisory roles. You've worked in law, engineering, business, global policy. I mean, that's amazing. So what drew you into the entrepreneurial world, and how did these diverse experiences prepare you to lead EWM?
Great, and great question. So I have always really been drawn to complex questions and solutions, and also working together with others. And the entrepreneur areas and the scene is a great place to do that. It is great minds. You can work on solving complex, high-impact problems, which I find extremely interesting and also extremely rewarding. So that's why I ended up going even into, a smaller company, CEO of a smaller company, having been at, large law firms and Fortune 500 companies. This really drew me to be able to make an impact.
It's funny, not many people can make the transition from large organization, corporate or big law firm to that entrepreneurial. Were there certain things that you had to adjust as a person to make that transition?
Oh yes, a lot. Probably the largest for me was the finance end. So coming into a company that had, quite a bit of an establishment, but also was growing at the time, was an interesting thing for me. I used to say I was drinking from a fire hose with the financial end. Luckily, our CFO at the time was a former investment banker, and I spent many, many hours on the phone learning from him and learning what to do, and it was fascinating. As I said, I really think that when you get a team around you that have different specialties and different areas, you can all work together to something great. So that was definitely a challenge. I feel better now. My husband is a CPA, and I would even have to ask him some questions of what does this mean. But it's great to learn a new area and also to pull it all together and work towards a greater good.
One of the areas that personally I'm fascinated with is desalination. I mean, with everything that's going on in the world, and that resource becoming incredibly valuable. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit, just in, kind of high level, what desalination is and this kind of the state of desalination technology, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper if you don't mind.
Yes, for sure. So desalination is very important in the world in terms of where we're going. We need more and more desalination. As you know, most of the water on Earth, 97%, is salt water. So as we continue to grow in population, and not just grow in population, but grow different areas, right? So certain countries are growing faster than others. We have climate change happening. Climate change is actually making the places that have less water even less, and more water even more, and it's hard to capture. People are not ready to capture a lot of the fresh water. It turns into seawater. So desalination is really something that has been on everyone's mind for a long time. And typically the way that desalination has been done over the past is you would bring in, for instance, 100 million gallons of water from the ocean.
Okay.
And you would push all of the salts and minerals into 50%. You would dump the 50% back in the ocean, and you would have 50% clean water. And the way that you push the minerals over, there's basically two types of technologies that have been around forever. And one is a membrane technology, which uses force, which is like a filter with force. And the other is a thermal evaporation and issues like that. You can evaporate water, it's then pure, then you can capture it again. But there's been issues with that because, as you can see from how I described it, first of all, there's a lot of energy used. I mean, you're going to be pulling in a lot of water for basically 50% yield. Two, people are concerned about putting the brine, which is the concentration, back into the ocean. And three, the cost. So the water that comes out of a desalination facility can be fairly expensive because the water is the only thing you're selling. And so it has to pay for the whole system. So that's why it hasn't necessarily spread as fast as it can. It has a lot of challenges. EWM was a company that came up with a technology that could individually pull out the minerals instead of pushing them into a waste stream. And the concept was called full recovery desalination, which is to take everything out of the water and make use of it so there's no waste. So if you want 50 million gallons of water, you could bring in 51. There's some evaporation, there's some liquid products, but you could bring in 51, and individually through different steps you can pull out the magnesium and the salt, and if there's lithium, and there's all of the minerals, and everything in seawater is very usable and very, very needed, especially with the energy transition. There's a lot of minerals in that water that can be used for the energy transition as well. So the concept was to eliminate the waste, to have other minerals to sell, so that basically water can be free, because the sale of the minerals is so much more valuable than the water. So it can take care of a lot of the issues with the current desalination model that we're currently having. Energy is still an issue. And so one of the things that we worked on, and many others are working on and is increasing, is using renewable energy. The issue with that, of course, is that renewable energy is not 24/7, and desalination plants really have to run 24/7. So until we get really good storage of renewable energy, which is another area that is also booming in technology, and people are working on that as well. But until we get really good storage, having a full facility operating on renewable is difficult. We've been involved. EWM has some technologies working in that area as well. So the hope is take care of all the issues, take care of the energy problem, the waste problem, and also the cost is the hope, which where we would like to go, and then hopefully desalination could be available to more.
That's amazing. And so today, if you look at where desalination is being leveraged in the world, where is it the most popular, let's say?
Desalination is the most popular in the Middle East.
Okay.
And that's where EWM, for instance, worked a lot, because it is very popular there with the deserts, and the need for water is extremely, extremely important. So it's used prolifically. It's probably the number one source of water in the Middle East. In the United States, it's not. We have a couple of desalination facilities. We're working on more. But that's not currently the manner that we're using in the United States for the majority of our water.
Well, and in the U.S., I'm sure the ocean is a source, but I'd also read somewhere something about taking brackish water and trying to turn it into drinkable water.
Exactly. So the brackish water is the really deep groundwater that's salty. Most of that is the exact same constituents of what's in ocean water, but it's much more diluted. It's had a whole bunch of millions and zillions of years of rainfall, right, that actually diluted it. But it's the same basic constituents that you see in ocean water. So it has a lot of the same valuable components. And again, it is salty, and so you can use a desalination process on that to create clean water as well.
And it's fascinating that the technology is there, is what it sounds like, to do it, but then the supporting technology needs to catch up to make it as economically viable for more worldwide use of it.
Yes, yes. The other issue is with the concept of removing all the minerals. It uses a whole lot more space and a whole lot more pieces of equipment because you're going to be removing minerals one at a time. And so the upfront capital cost can be more expensive, but then usually the payback period is 3 years, which is unheard of in most capital expenditures. But that's also an issue that has to be worked at. And my thought there is to have a little bit more public-private partnerships and to figure a way to fund the initial part, knowing that, of course, the payback will be coming very soon. So that is another area that we can work on together, which is finding out how to fund and start these facilities.
So I'm visualizing these, huge buildings. I'm just wondering what does a typical desalination plant, would I say that, look like? How big is it?
Well, so it depends on what you're doing. So if you're doing the traditional desalination, which is moving the minerals into 50%, then you are looking at big, huge, pieces of equipment that are, for instance, the filters with the pressure behind it. So these are typically housed inside big warehouses. You don't want the elements to really hit them. And you can, see the water coming in, the pipes, energy, lots of energy is needed. So a lot of these facilities have their own generation, own power plant right outside. So you might see that outside, but you'll see tons of pipes coming in of the water, pipes going out of the water, and pipes going out if there is brine, which is the wastewater as well.
I can't wait to just dig in more, so thank you for that. Your background, I mean, you've worked with international trade, you've advised presidential candidates. How can your experience inform entrepreneurs who they want to more effectively engage in policy change, but I think it's overwhelming at some point to a lot of us. So how would you advise entrepreneurs to be able to help with more meaningful change in policy?
That's a great question, because policy is a big passion of mine. And I really believe that there's an intersection between technology, humans, and policy. And those are the three areas that we have all of the issues that we need to solve, in my mind. So policy to me is a huge aspect of many things. It's a huge aspect of renewables. It's a huge aspect of the mineral transitions. It's a huge aspect of everything that's going on. Tariff, trade, sales, everything you can think of. It's a huge aspect. So what I envision and what I like for entrepreneurs to do is to get involved early. And, it's not only about lobbying. People think policy is lobbying, and that's really not what policy is in my mind. Policy in my mind is creating communities that understand what it is that you're trying to do and what you need to get there. And it's really an education. And it's an education of community. It's an education of your representatives. But you should start early. Because when you actually need something or a change, you won't have the contacts. So it really is beneficial to your company as well as policy down the line to start the education and to start telling people what you need. There's also many groups I shared, for instance, some groups at the Austin Chamber. And so the chamber does, trips to DC and takes policy issues, and they have roundtables, and they want to hear, what are your issues? What needs to be changed? And so you can have a bigger voice by going to some of these places as well that can carry your message. And they often have representatives that come in and have dinners and roundtables, and they want to hear, what do you need? What is the issue? What are the problems? So I really think of policy more as education so that people know how to help you. That's how I think of policy.
I like that. And it sounds like it's kind of the long game, and entrepreneurs are not necessarily patient individuals. So I love the concept of getting engaged with an organization that is supporting so that they can have a voice, but not trying to do it all on their own.
Right, and there are so many, from trade associations to chambers, there's so many avenues that you can go that people can take your issue and make a voice of it.
One thing you've done, a give back, which is so admirable, is mentorship of law students, mentorship of, startup founders. I'm sure you're seeing like some critical mind shifts that these entrepreneurs need to make. What guidance would you have?
Right. There's a lot of changes being made right now with regard to how entrepreneurs work and how they can gather together and can be more collaborative. So one of the main mind shifts that I see happening, which I think is needed, is what I say, from moving from control to collaboration. So, a lot of entrepreneurs have great ideas and great visions, but the best way to execute is to listen to people around you as well. And so the collaboration is very, very important. The most successful entrepreneurs I've seen are the people that get a good collaboration around them. I haven't seen too many startups that don't pivot a lot. Pivot from products, pivot from, potential customers, pivot from all of the avenues. So it's a learning experience. And so I think the more nimble you can be as well, and the more listening you can be, and collaborative, I think those are skills that I think are harder to come by for people who are really brilliant and see one vision. But it is something that I think makes them extremely successful.
That's great. So looking back at your career, you've been involved in the World Economic Forum, boardrooms, classrooms. What's been some of the most fulfilling chapters of your journey? And then what are you passionate about on a go-forward basis?
Well, some of the most rewarding things that I've had really have involved policy and changing the way that the world looks at things, and even through the water company. So policy needs to change in the water as well. Water, for instance, in many countries is subsidized. And so the direct cost that people see is not necessarily the cost of providing the water. In many countries, it's very different. It's all owned by states. And so it's interesting to learn and to pass on all of the information that can be learned from other countries of what's being done around the world. And I've seen that at various places like the World Economic Forum, and lots of issues on renewable energy and, computing power for everyone, and standalone water systems in countries that need it. And so the policy changes to me have been what has been really the most interesting, is being able to do that, to hopefully open up some more doors and windows.
And just the attitude towards water, and I hadn't experienced until I spent a lot of time in India, and there's always the bucket in the shower, right? And you're collecting the water, and as soon as you've got some water, you turn it off, and then you use the scoop. And here in the U.S., we turn that faucet and it just goes, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how the mind shift goes as we truly understand, it's a limited resource.
Exactly, and it's the legal system around it as well. In the United States, really, people own the water that falls from the sky onto their land. They own the water beneath their land. In some countries, every drop that even falls in the eave is owned by the state. And so, and you find different pros and cons, right? With all the different systems. So the interesting thing to me is to learn from all of those, right? To learn all of those and try to figure out what is the best combination that allows some freedom, some control, some more availability. But you're right. I mean, some countries, conservation is forced in a way because of the way that they handle the policy behind how water is done. In other countries, it's much more free. And water is never really a market commodity because it's often subsidized. So
Right.
It's very hard to follow traditional market rules with regard to water, thinking that, the more expensive it gets, the less people will use, which is a traditional market thought, is not necessarily what happens in water because it's subsidized. So it's interesting policy issues in the water area in particular that I find fascinating.
I'm curious to see what happens as we we go from either like abundance of water right now to long drought. So I think we'll learn as we go through. You've had a career that's taken around the world, different disciplines. What fuels your curiosity and your purpose?
What I am extremely interested in solving high impact problems that have social implications. So this is what I'm extremely interested in. For instance, if you just take water, water is a necessity for everything. It's a necessity for us. It's a necessity for animals. It's a necessity for growing crops. It's a necessity for everything. And so solving problems that can actually help society, to me, is what fuels me. And what's interesting is it's never dull, right? Because it's always changing.
Yeah.
Every day. I mean, now we have more AI and we have more data centers, and data centers need more water, and so everything is interconnected and it's ever changing. So it's never stagnant. It's always something to be worked on, which I find fascinating.
Love that you're doing that. I like to end each interview with a couple of questions. One is, what authentically makes a successful entrepreneur?
I think a successful entrepreneur has persistence. That's one thing that I would actually say, because as we talked about earlier, the road is not necessarily straight. It is very bendy, very winding. It is trying to solve problems others haven't solved. It's trying to sell those problems. It's trying to get the infrastructure around it to work for those issues. And so it is a very, very hard, but very rewarding path. So I would actually say persistence is one trait that I see, that and listening to others and including collaboration are the two that I would say.
Excellent. And how do you define success as an entrepreneur?
That is a great question. Because I do not define success as just the balance sheet. In fact, I really define success as the impact that you can make. I see a lot of people who will start a great idea and then, it's picked up by another entity that takes it to the next level. But it was started by someone else. So to me, it's the impact that you can make with what you are creating. And a social impact and a worldly impact. To me, impact is the definition of success.
I love that. Sue, thank you so much. This was just a delightful conversation.
Well, thank you. It's been such a pleasure. I really appreciate the chance to be with you.
Thank you again.